following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. The Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents The Gall of the Man. And now, the galling man himself, Ralph Zig Tycho.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am indeed the man with the gall, as Tally says. And the reason being is that they've been calling me that all my life, the man with the gall of the man. So I decided to name my podcast after that. And here I am, Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco and across the moat from Oakland. Northern California, I consider to be the paradise of the world. It's just terrific up here for the most part. The weather is great, but the culture is great as well. And as you know, listening audience, I speak with some of the most interesting people in the world. And today I'm drawing on two of the podcasters on my network, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. They are incredible mavens in the baseball world, which is my main passion. And we are going to have a show that honors the great Frank Robinson, who passed away last week.
No, yesterday.
Was it just yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah.
Yeah.
I have Alan Blumkin with me and David Nemec. First, we'll start with you, Alan. What did Frank Robinson mean to you as a baseball fan growing up? Okay,
I thought he was terrific, and I posted a personal story I'm in a group called Baseball University, the Sweet 16. It's basically covers the year.
Facebook for all you people who are
it covers the years from 1901 to 1960 before the first expansion. And I put out a Frank Robinson story that actually happened to me. I forget whether it was 1977 or 1978, but I'm waiting on the subway platform of the D train after one of the Yankees postseason games during those years. I forget whether it was a LCS game or a World Series game. So I'm standing there waiting for the D train, and I turn around, and Frank Robinson is directly behind me. And I did a double take, and he immediately knew it. I knew who he was, and I said under my breath, I said, "What's a?" He wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet. I said, "What's a future Hall of Famer like you doing riding the D train?" And he took a look at me and said, "Because the hotel, they were at a hotel on 7th Avenue and 53rd Street. It's undergone."
What was it? The Biltmore?
No, it was the Americana. It's gone. That hotel has undergone a few name changes over the years.
Okay.
It's 7th exactly on 7th Avenue and 53rd Street. And it hasn't changed its name as often as the hotel across the street from the new garden, the garden on 34th Street. But anyway, so he puts his finger to his mouth, asking me not to reveal who he was. So I said, I nodded, and he said, "Thank you," and that was it. But
was he alone?
It was such an experience. I haven't forgotten it at all. You're standing there waiting for a stupid subway train, and you got a soon-to-be Hall of Famer standing in back of you.
Our brushes with greatness, and that was.
Oh yeah, he was terrific, and he played very, very hard. He took no quarter and gave no quarter. He was hit by pitch an awful lot.
I'm wondering if David Nemec will back me up on this. If it weren't for the fact that Frank played in an era that Henry Aaron, Willie Mays, and Roberto Clemente were pretty much the starting lineup for the National League All-Star team for like 10, 12, 15 years in a row, even though Frank, rightfully so, is in the Hall of Fame. He's judged as a great player, two league MVP, first black manager, all those things. I contend he gets short rift in public opinion when...
Yeah, short shrift, exactly, yeah.
Short shrift.
Yeah, because basically he's the only one of those four that was traded during his prime when Mays came back to New York and Aaron went to the Brewers. They were basically at the end.
Yeah.
David,
and
what
Clement,
say
they
you?
Never played for anybody else. But
David,
Frank bounced around a lot. He bounced around considerably compared to the others.
He did indeed. David, what say you about Frank Robinson?
I was fortunate enough to see him play both with the Reds in Crosley Field and with Cleveland Stadium. And I got a real break in 1960. I was in the Army, and we got a pass, and they were playing the Brewers. Actually, they were the Braves, and still the Braves in 1960. And we went out to Crosley, and we saw a 10-inning game. The Braves won. Frank didn't do anything particularly to distinguish himself in that game, but games I saw him play later on. I was living in New York at the time in 1975, working for the Department of Parole as a parole officer. And we were all gathered around a radio in an office in the parole building listening to opening day in 1975. The Indians were playing the Yankees. And when Robinson hit one out, even the rabid Yankee fans went wild. I mean, it was really something to listen to that. And
his first,
I was
this is his first game as a manager.
Yeah, first inning. I just looked that up. On the because I had somebody question me whether it was a game winner, and I just looked it up on the baseball references in the first inning.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, first inning.
Yeah. His first time at bat in Cleveland uniform, his first time at bat as a manager. Bingo. Yeah.
And plus he had to adjust to the red uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought when he came to the American League and what turned out to be one of the most one-sided trades in baseball history, that the American League had never really seen anybody like him before.
No, they didn't.
During that era, yeah. Because all the
prejudice trading him. They said he had an old body. Did Cincinnati, and in truth, he was as lanky as can be. The man was never out of shape, and he proved it with Baltimore.
No, a couple of years before that, he was caught carrying a gun as protection, and and the Reds at that time were holier than now, and they decided that they didn't want him anymore because of the blotch on his record with the gun.
I appreciate that. It was he did get a bad rap for that. He wasn't carrying it.
But he spent about a year and a half in Columbia, South Carolina. He was from born in Beaumont, Texas, but moved to Oakland when he was very young, and he graduated McClymonds High School, which is the same school high school that Veda Pinson and Kurt Flood came from, and also some basketball player by the name of Bill Russell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Russell.
And he ran Russell out as a starting center early on in Russell's development.
Yeah, Russell was about a year ahead of him. But they were all on the same team, and George Powell's the coach. Not only ran the baseball team of McClymonds and the basketball team, he was also the American Legion coach for the Bill Irwin chapter of the American Legion, and they won several World Series under him. And Robinson, Flood, Pinson, they were all part of those World Series or those American Legion Championship teams.
And that gentleman
is very little known today for some.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry. I said Powell's is very little remembered today, and it's unfortunate because McClymonds has deteriorated as a high school and as an athletic program. But during his time there, they were a powerhouse in both basketball and baseball. They weren't a big school.
And he happened to be a bird dog scout for the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, because Flood was originally a Red and was traded after 1958 to the Cardinals for 3 nondescript pitches because he was stuck behind Pinson.
They just nailed the whole McClymonds outfield.
Yeah.
Robinson, Flood, and Pinson. Yeah.
And there've been a load of pictures posted for Frank in the last day on Facebook, and one of them had him actually in a basketball uniform.
Oh, wow! I've never seen
he was
one.
a good basketball player.
He was a center at McClymonds, and I think he started over Russell at one time or another.
No, he was behind Russell. He was behind a year and a half.
He was
Russell
behind a year and a half, but he started.
Tuesday, Russell will be 85. Russell's a week younger than Henry Aaron.
Well,
Russell will be 85 on Tuesday.
All these guys, Willie's well up into his 80s.
Yeah.
Aaron's in his 80s.
Well, Willie Mays, if you don't count Lasorda, who's in the Hall of Fame as a manager, the Whitey Ford's the only one left from the 1920s, and Mays is the second oldest Hall of Famer right now.
Yeah.
This is how much time things have changed over the last bunch of years.
Yeah.
Boy, and it definitely reflects the passing of our youth.
Oh, yeah.
Al mentioned that Robinson played for 2 years in the Sally League. He had a great year the first year.
They hurt his arm in 1954, his throwing arm.
Then
they
sent him back to the Sally League
next
year, and as you say, he hurt his arm. I never understood why they sent him back to the Sally League.
No, because he hurt his arm, and according to what I've read, he hurt his arm in spring training of 1954.
Yeah.
So he was in the Texas League for a while, and they sent him back to the Sally League, and they didn't really have any room for him after 54 because they had Gus Bell and Wally Post, and the left fielder was outfielder by the name of Jim Greengrass, who had a couple of very good years for the Reds before his career was derailed by phlebitis. And that's who essentially Frank Robinson replaced in the Reds outfield was Greengrass.
Yeah.
I did an interview once with a major league scout named Jethro McIntyre. And Jethro played for McClymonds, was a teammate of Frank Robinson and Pinson and Kurt Flood and all that, and happened to have been signed by Bowles in the Cincinnati Red organization. And he told me because of the farm system, and pretty much the same as any other major league team, but worse in Cincinnati, Frank Robinson and those guys took more abuse because all these farm teams were in the South, Harder-Dixie. They, in essence, took more abuse than Jackie Robinson. Now,
well, we were spending time in Columbia, South Carolina in those days. I mean, it has to. And the ones who,
as opposed to Montreal.
Yeah, the ones who reacted to it worse. See, Mays and Willie Mays and Henry Aaron were both born in Alabama, so this was nothing new to them. I mean, probably the vitriol was, a lot newer than more than they had experienced before. But the guys who came from the far west or the northeast, I know Dick Allen had a lot of trouble with Little Rock. And,
Northern blacks.
Northern blacks and Western blacks, forget it. They weren't used to any of this at all.
Yes.
No, nothing like
Now, why do you think the Dodgers sent Jackie Robinson to Montreal instead of sending him to Mobile, which was a Double-A farm team of theirs.
Of course. Now, my statement doesn't diminish the abuse that Jackie took.
Yeah.
It was just a different level. And remember, when by the time Frank came up, it was 10 years after Jackie.
Yeah.
9 years after Jackie. So these players had assumed when they were signed that things were different, and they really weren't.
There's an author named Jules Tigel, who passed away a number of years ago. He came in to speak to us in New York City. Oh God, I don't even know how many years ago this was. And I asked him. He did a book called Baseball's Great Experiment about all the black players, in the next 10 years or so that followed Jackie Robinson. I asked him point blank. I said one of the impressions I got was that the baseball ownership or general managers or whoever was in charge sent these people to places like Columbia, South Carolina, to see whether or not they could take it.
Yeah,
and hoping maybe some of them would quit so they wouldn't have to deal with it.
The worst prejudice that Bill Russell ever experienced in his life was not in the South.
In Boston.
Where he was born.
Yeah.
It was in Boston. And so let's talk about the difference between overt prejudice and covert prejudice, which the North is famous for covert prejudice, and the South is famous for overt prejudice. David, would you address that?
Well, coming from Cleveland, Ralph, when Cleveland, integrated in 1947 quickly, and they welcomed Dobie on the team in 1948. They welcomed Satchel Paige. So Cleveland was and then the 46 Cleveland Browns were, dominated by black players like Marion Motley and Bill Willis. So Cleveland is a sports town. Experienced very little prejudice because they were used to losing. And when the Browns came in 46 and won it all, and Dobie came in 47, and then the Indians won it all in 48, they were good with black players. And then the first black pro basketball coach ever also coached the Cleveland Pipers, which were owned by George Steinbrenner. They were a rival to the NBA, I think the ABL. And McClendon came in 1960 or 61 and won a championship right away. So Cleveland was an example of a city in the North that there definitely was prejudice in Cleveland. There definitely were African American neighborhoods, white neighborhoods. There was prejudice from the Poles against the Greeks, against it is a very ethnic city. And the neighborhoods were as a result. My grandmother grew up lived in an area where she had to speak 8 languages just to keep up. And it was in Cleveland throughout my youth. They had a lot of good black athletes in the high schools who went on to do very well in college, and some in the pros. So Cleveland was probably an outlier as far as racial prejudice went.
Interesting that they accepted Vic Power more readily than New York and the Yankees.
Well, the story with Vic Power was that he had a terrific year for Kansas City in the American Association in 1953, and that was they were a Yankee farm team. In fact, a lot of people say when the A's moved there in '55, they became the Yankee farm team. But be it as that may, George Weiss, who was not exactly a big fan of minorities, was running the Yankees at the time, and when they traded Power to the then Philadelphia A's after 1953, he said that Power was not the Yankee type, meaning that Vic Power was a showman, I just discussed this on Facebook the other day. That's why it's fresh. And that his girlfriend at the time, I don't know if she married him or whatever, was light-skinned.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Power was a flashy guy. He drove.
Yeah, he played flashy with the bat.
He was Cleveland for a number of years.
And the fielding, yeah.
And he drove a pink Cadillac convertible, and he buzzed around town. Everybody knew him, recognized him. Cleveland was, very happy to get him, and it looked like a pretty good deal for Cleveland originally, even though they gave up Roger Maris. But we all know how that turned out. But Power was still a good ball player, and he was popular in Cleveland.
Well, George Weiss was one of the decision makers with the Mets to draft Steve Chilcott, number one, when they had the free agent, and pass up Reggie Jackson because he didn't like some of Reggie Jackson's activities.
Yeah, that was a very smart move.
I think his activity was the color of his skin.
No, his activity was going out with women who were light-skinned.
Oh, okay. Well,
same thing as Vic Power.
Yeah, Power did. But the Indians were, they had a lot of good black players come up in the early 50s, and they were the only. They were the power in the American League initially with their black players. They hadn't traded Minnie Minoso in a very stupid deal.
Or Al Smith, am I correct?
No, they got that was later on. And in early 51, they traded. It was a 3-team trade between the Indians, the A's, and the White Sox. And the Indians sent Minoso to the White Sox, and the White Sox sent Dave Philly and Gus Zernial to the A's, and the Indians wound up getting Lou Brissy, the pitcher with the damaged leg, who was on the way out in that trade. This was right in the second week of the 1951 season.
Yeah, Cleveland planned on making him into what at that time would have been their number one relief pitcher.
Yeah.
Brissy didn't have that kind of control to come in from the pen with men on base, and the trade exploded very quickly in Cleveland.
Yeah, Minoso turned into a superstar that year who should have gotten the Rookie of the Year over Gil McDougald.
Absolutely. That was one of the most unfortunate.
But getting back to Frank Robinson, he came up and was an immediate success. He's on that the Reds team that hit 221 home runs, and he led them in home runs with 38 that year. And he was named Rookie of the Year, and he just went on, and then in 60, 61, and 62, he had really tremendous years.
Talk about him defensively. He doesn't get
No, he didn't have a good throwing arm, but outside of that, he was as good as anybody.
Okay.
He was also a good base runner.
Yeah, and he went in no holds barred.
Yeah.
And he got hit by a lot of pitches, and I just read a story that there's only one time after he was hit by a pitch he charged the mound because he thought it was racial. He just get up, shake the dirt off his uniform, get up, and tattoo the pitcher the next time up.
Yeah, it made me think when you said that of a Cincinnati pitcher named Brooks Lawrence, a black.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
To come up in Cincinnati, Frank and Veda and all these people, Cincinnati itself was kind of a border state.
Exactly.
Yeah, they have a Southern mentality. It's Kentucky mentality.
Right across the bridge.
The river, yeah. And the things
right across.
Brooks Lawrence came up originally with the Cardinals in 1954 and went 15-6. He was a 29-year-old rookie. And then the Cardinals sent him if they had a bad year in '55. He was sent to the Reds in the trade, and he won 19. And I just did a profile on him. That's how I know all this stuff. He did won 19 games for them in '56 and 16 games in '57, and then the bottom fell out, and he was gone early in 1960.
Alan, don't be modest. To do a profile, you had to know this stuff.
Yeah. Well, Jim Howell, who runs the suite.
David both have encyclopedic memories of this, and
Jim Howell, who my good friend from Pittsburgh, runs the Sweet 16 site, and he'll put down remember so and so. So the other day he put down remember, and there's a number of the lesser black players from that era. And one of them was Brooks Lawrence. So I did what I do. I went to the reference and going back and forth between Facebook and reference to make sure I got all the numbers and dates right. And I did a profile on Brooks Lawrence 2 days ago.
Okay. Also must tell the listening audience just how valuable you are to the SABR organization. Alan, what is SABR for those who haven't listened or don't know?
It's a Society for American Baseball Research.
Okay.
And unfortunately, its name has been attached to the wave of new statistics that have come out over the last bunch of years.
Okay.
Yeah. Because people like David and myself are not part of that wave.
No, we're more interested in the history of the game and.
Well, let me ask you, David, first. Is there any of the new statistics that you find valuable? Because I use all the time, and
OBP and OPS are mine.
That's the one.
And WHIP for the pitchers, walks and hits per inning. But this nonsense with WAR. I mean, this guy Jeremy Learman, I think you had him on once, wrote a book on MVPs. He did a post yesterday that said Babe Ruth was the greatest but not the best, and he went by WAR. In fact, when Babe Ruth was playing, the competition was inferior. So when he re-ranked the players,
Ruth was playing, he was superior.
Yeah.
If you look at it that way, I don't think you can doubt that that statistics don't transcend to greatness.
But the thing is, when he re-ranked the players, the hitters, number 1 was Barry Bonds and number 3 was A-Rod. And those two have something in common.
They do. They played in an era where they were up against other players that have the same thing in common, especially relief pitchers. And they must be judged by...
No, I'm talking about the steroids.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
The steroids.
Yeah. And don't you think that 80% of players that Bonds and Clemens were playing against?
No, I don't buy what Peter Gollenbach says on that at all.
Well,
I don't think it was that high either. And I think a lot of guys suffered as a result. They tried to play the game honestly, just with their natural talent, and they got buried. They got lost in the shuffle in the farm systems and ended up with abbreviated careers, if even that. And some of these guys, I've talked to a couple of guys who played in the 90s, who either barely made the majors or ended up stuck in the minors. And they're very bitter about it. They really, they really think they were cheated out of a possible career in Major League Baseball, and I don't blame them. I think they were too.
Yeah, another thing about Frank Robinson, which is not very widely known, he won the Triple Crown in 1966. I mean, he's putting up numbers during what I call Dead Ball 2, which was from 63 to 68, because of with the higher the mound and the expanded strike zone. 1967, he was having a good year, as he did in 1966, and he got involved in a collision at second base. He was sliding to the second base against the White Sox, and his head hit the White Sox second baseman, who Al Weiss, who later went on to World Series fame with the Mets in 1969. And Robinson wasn't right for the rest of that season. course, today, they would call it a concussion. But he had double vision for a good part of that, for the rest of the season, basically, after that.
Al, and David, I heard that he suffered that double vision for the rest of his career, and he played through it. And
maybe you're right, because his numbers were not, for the rest of it. He was also slowing down at that point. Look, he was 36 years old when the Orioles, won the pennant in 1971. And right after that series, which where Pirates beat them, a month after that series ended, the Orioles traded him to the Dodgers to make room for Merv Rettenmund. They must have thought he was on the downgrade. The Dodgers kept him for a year, and then he went to the Angels for a couple of years, and then they gave him the job in Cleveland. And he played a handful of games in 1976. But he was, he gave no quarter. And when he was managing, he was very, very disciplined. If the players, even though he didn't really manage a whole bunch of very good teams, if the players didn't play the game what he thought was the right way, he would be all over them. He probably, got out of managing when it was good. I remember watching a game on a Met game on TV in 2004. Frank was managing the Expos, and I'm watching this on TV and seeing the late April or early May. It's about 40 degrees, and there's about 100 people out there in Shea Stadium. And I'm saying to myself, I'm saying to the TV, I said, Frank, you're a Hall of Famer. You're one of the best players ever to play this game. I said, what the hell do you need this for? And he's out there freezing his tail off, and I guess he was one of these people that they had to tear the uniform off.
What do people like that, ball players, what did they do if not baseball? To keep the competitive spirit going, that flame burning, the competition. Can't blame him for.
No, especially he did manage before he became manager of the Indies. He did manage in the Puerto Rican League over the winter before that.
Yes. Any final thoughts on Frank from you, David Nemec?
I think that part, I didn't know about that slide into second base, but he didn't have a good season in '68 either.
Well, nobody did in the American League.
Well, nobody did, but I think he hit in the 260s.
Didn't Yaz win the batting title with a 301?
Yeah, 301, and Danny Cato was runner-up with, I think, 292. And Robinson was down there, maybe 9th or 10th. A case could probably maybe be made that he might have had double vision or slight double vision for the rest of his career. I know I had it ever since exactly the same year, 1967. And I was able to play senior league ball with it. I know I could never have played Major League Baseball with it, but a slight case of double vision you can get around.
Well, David, I couldn't play Major League Baseball without it. So,
well, I couldn't either.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get you guys the article or a link to the article about Frank's double vision. Thank you both for being here. We're going to take a break, and my second guest for the day is arriving a little later, and he's Gabriel Schechter. We're going to talk unrelated baseball stuff, so please stick around, and we'll be back in a few minutes. David and Alan, I want to thank you not just for this, but being incredible contributors to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Whether you know it or not, David, we are 3 years old this month as a network.
No, I didn't know that. Wow.
And we've got an array of programming. that's really top-notch. I'm blessed to have some of the best minds in baseball and in life. We're not just baseball. We cover other sports. We political science, all kinds of stuff going on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I want to just assure you that you're both integral parts of it all, and you have my sincere gratitude. Alan Blumpkin and David Nemec.
Yeah, Ralph, just one thing. Al Anderson and I are talking about doing a podcast when he has the time on the 1952 Topps baseball set.
Oh, that sounds like a
yeah, because we discussed that for about half an hour today.
That's a great topic. What a terrific set that was.
All right, David wants to join, or you want to join, you're more than welcome.
Set it up, Al. I'll be there if you'd like. And,
all right.
David, you've gone through a bunch of moves, and illnesses and recoveries, and I'm glad you're back in top notch.
Oh, good. Thank you, Ralph. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, what's really funny is that when they had the Sabre National here in 1991, and Steve Nadell, who I think has done a podcast or two with you about the Bronx,
yes.
Was running the convention, and he calls me up one day and says, I got this guy from the West Coast, David Nemec, who wants to come to this. So I said, you ever hear of him? I said, hear of him. I said, I had those books, those trivia books from the 70s for years. And then the rest is history.
And David, I've thanked you before for those books, but this is before the internet and before computer simulation games, and Hot Stove League for a guy like me was much different then, and totally enhanced by your work. And you work my brain, and the only thing it does well, and that's sports. So much appreciation, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Ralph, we appreciate the opportunity to do
guys.
this.
Stay tuned. Stay on the line, everybody. We'll be back with Gabriel Schechter before you know it. One click. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tycho. The guests have been Alan Blumpkin and both fellow podcasters, Alan Blumpkin and David Nemec. We'll be back. Thanks.
Take care.
Adios.
Okay. Al, are you still on? Al? Al? Anybody there?
I'm back. Ralph Tycho, the Gall of the Man. I'd like to thank Mr. David Nemec and Mr. Alan Blumpkin for the first segment. Terrific. We talked about Frank Robinson, and I'm going to continue the discussion about Frank for a little bit with my next guest, returning to the airwaves, kind of one of the usual suspects on Sunday mornings when we talk to George Case, in case you're wondering, on this network, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And his name is Gabriel Schechter. How are you, Gabriel? Welcome back.
I am fine, Ralph, and happy to be here with you. Let's hang out a while.
Oh, yes, it's a way to talk life, and in this case, we talking, as I mentioned, about the life and times of Robinson a little bit. He passed away. We're both baseball fanatics, and I'd like to, right off the top, have you tell me what Frank meant to you and to baseball.
Well, first of all, to me, I was born a Cincinnati Reds fan. My father was from Cincinnati, and sometimes it feels like a congenital defect, but not when Frank Robinson played for the Reds. I came of age in baseball in 1961 when he led the Reds to the World Series, and I grew up listening to, among other Major League broadcasts, the Reds broadcasts with Wade Hoyt, the one I remember most, later Joe Nuxhall. But listening to my favorite two Reds, Frank Robinson and Vada Pinson, batting back-to-back. And I was talking to someone earlier about this. Don Drysdale. I hated Don Drysdale growing up because every time Frank Robinson came to the plate, Drysdale knocked him down, or tried to. And that's like indelibly etched on my memory from childhood every time. Frank Robinson was the heart. Excuse me?
I was just going to say, as a Giant fan, Drysdale would knock Willie Mays down with equal fervence. So.
Oh yeah, that was his MO. Absolutely.
It was Frank Robinson per se. It was anybody who was great who would hang in there, and that was his style. But
yep.
Go ahead.
Robinson was the heart and soul of that team. He was the leader on the field. He was the leader in the clubhouse, the judge in the kangaroo court, which kept order and baseball sharpness. He was known as a sort of a malcontent and a dangerous character, which was simply because he did not tolerate racism and bad treatment. The day he got traded to Baltimore was a dark day for Reds fans, and I remember the gloom in our house. My father and I were outraged, distraught, and we were right, because Bill DeWitt had truly screwed the team by trading Robinson away.
Yeah. I was going to say that Milt Pappas didn't work out, and Frank Robinson became an MVP yet again in the second league.
Yeah.
He played.
Won the Triple Crown. Nothing to it. So he proved the Reds wrong. He went on for another decade. When he retired, he was fourth on the home run list. The fact that he became the first African-American manager is the icing on the cake for him. People forget how great a player he was. There are some great players who were kind of overlooked. Robinson, one of them, because he was overshadowed by Mays and Aaron. Stan Musial, not given the credit because he was overshadowed by DiMaggio and Williams. And Tris Speaker, amazing player, overshadowed by Ty Cobb and Hannes Wagner. So you have to have seen him. He was a 5-tool player and then some. Smart player, tough player. It's terrific. And what he did after his playing career was every bit as significant. He gave his life to Major League Baseball. He dedicated himself to whatever he did. Before he managed in the majors, he had been managing in the Winter League in Puerto Rico for 10 or 15 years. He was a legend there for the Winter Leagues. I mean, the man did just about everything you can do in baseball, and huge respect for him.
Yeah. So again, I mentioned it before. He, ironically, talking about the same thing, him being overshadowed. Mays, Clemente, Aaron starting like 15 consecutive games in the All-Star game for the National League.
Yeah.
And Robinson just got short shrift. Short shrift. He 500-plus home runs, Hall of Fame, acknowledged, first black manager ever. And that day in itself, he comes out as the DH in the first time a black man manages in the American League, and has the presence to stay in the moment. Hits a home run in the first inning.
Yeah.
What you talk about the shot heard round the world. That was a very, very dramatic moment right there.
Oh, it sure was.
Off the subject and on the subject a little bit, he was the first black to manage in the majors. Well, he never, in his entire career until the 80s, never managed against another black man. And as a matter of fact, no two blacks had managed against each other until the late 80s. I can't think of the exact year. I'll look it up for you and send you a little note. But I got to watch Darryl Thomas manage against a guy by the name of Mal Turner, who later became the first base coach for the Phillies. And this was in Northwest League, but it was the first time two black men ever managed in organized ball. And I got to see that as the Topps representative, just happened to be covering that game. And it was one of my favorite moments as a fan, as a human. I got to see that. I got to chat with Darryl Thomas about that. It was wonderful. So
very cool.
History like that. It's amazing that happens like in the 19th, 20th century. This is crazy that it's taken this long for baseball to show the kind of humanity that you would think would come natural for people in the entertainment business.
I agree, absolutely.
So that is a disgrace. And anything else you could think to talk about, Frank? And we'll get on to something.
Well, just a footnote from our last podcast, Ralph. In the last Dice Ball weekend season in 2014, Frank Robinson became the first everyday player we've ever had to bat over 400 over a 36-game season. We'd had platoon players top 400. But he was the captain of my team, and he led the team to a pennant, was the MVP. So
very good.
He's got a dice ball legacy, too.
For those of you out there that don't realize the importance of dice baseball or simulated baseball or whatever you want for our imaginations as fanatical baseball fans, and how those games are more important to us who are nuts than real games in history. We remember those games, those series, those matchups, those seasons, like it was real. And
oh, yeah.
Much like religion, we have imaginary friends. They're as important to us as in our religion as other imaginary friends are in their religion. So I don't mean to make light of it all, yet I do. So,
Ralph, it's as real as anything.
Right, exactly, and more real than most. So, what can I say? Well, if you're not living in your own head, then I'm sorry for you out there.
Exactly.
That's the way to best way I can describe it. It makes for an interesting life. Let's put it that way. You're always never bored. I'll bet you have never had a moment, well, I'm bored, I've got nothing to do. No, that's not in either of our vocabularies. There's always something to do, to put.
That's all. That is so correct. That's
right.
true. It's always been the case.
So, and I thank God for, if it weren't for my passion of baseball in particular, sports in general, but baseball in particular, I can't imagine how I would go through life. You know, it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
What would your passion be if it wasn't baseball? Is there anything a close second?
Words. You know, I dedicated my first book, my Victory Faust book, and the dedication is to my parents who taught me to love baseball and words. I'm a writer. I'm a voracious reader. I love words in almost any form, except poetry.
Well, the right kind of poem. The right kind of poem can get to you.
I don't have the affinity for poetry that I have for prose. My mind works in sentences, not in rhythm. So I respond to prose, fiction, nonfiction, anything.
My affinity for poetry comes from two specific poems. One is Invictus by William Ernest Henley. That affected my life a great deal. I think about that poem, how you go through life and what have you. That's basically ideology, philosophy, this, that, and the other thing. And the other one that really affected me was, oh my God, Richard Corey. Whenever Richard Corey went down to
Edward Arlington Robinson.
Yes, and he was envied by all, and you never know what's going on in a person's head, and
I once did, Ralph, about 50 years ago, I wrote a parody of that poem titled Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, Child of Scorn, and I went from there. You can probably look at the original and figure out what I did with it.
Just the opposite. We people we hated him. Beautiful, beautiful. let's talk about books that influenced our lives. It starts with something that you mentioned on a post in Facebook, and I picked up on it, and I thought I'd like to talk to you about this.
Yes.
And I'll tell you some books that influenced my life along the way. But let's start with your favorite and...
The most important book in my life is John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie. I read it about 50 years ago when I was 18 years old, and I am here where I'm sitting today because of that book. And it's even though the novels I wrote weren't publishable, I still think as a novelist, and every person's life is a novel to me. In my own life, I can pick out one of the plot threads very clearly, and it starts with Travels with Charlie. All right, so it happened my freshman year in college. I went to Colgate University in central New York in the Snow Belt. And in January of 1970, a kid in my dorm, Bill Strauss, drove on snow for the first time. And he had two fender benders, one driving into town, one driving back to campus. And he was scared to call his father and tell him. So his plan B was to get drunk, and about a dozen of us helped him. And we wound up in the middle of the night in January out on the ski slope, the campus ski slope, which was across the street from the infirmary. I like that. Going down the ski slope in cafeteria trays. This was a thing. You got like on the small of your back, put your feet up in the air, held on with your hands, and you went down the ski slope. It was, primitive tobogganing. And we did this for a couple of hours. It was terrific. Well, I hadn't worn a coat, and I wound up in the infirmary with bronchitis. And I was just in there long enough to get exposed to chicken pox. So 2 weeks later, I was back in the infirmary with chicken pox, much to the amusement of the people in my dorm. And at that point, somebody gave me a copy of Travels with Charlie. Now, my parents were big Steinbeck fans. My father believed that Of Mice and Men, word for word, was the most powerful thing he ever read, and it's hard to argue with it. But I hadn't read Travels with Charlie, and everybody should read it. If you haven't, it's about Steinbeck's trip around the United States in 1962 with his French poodle, Charlie, in a kind of a custom-built pickup with a cab in the back, and they went basically around the perimeter of the country, rediscovering an America that he thought he had lost touch with while he was busy writing and getting famous and winning the Nobel Prize. And the book is the memoir of that trip. Well, you have to understand, Ralph, I grew up in New Jersey. I was going on 19. I had never been west or south of Philadelphia. And I read this book about this country. And I thought, holy shit, I got to see this country.
Well, you're an explorer. That takes a lot of guts, too.
Well, the following summer, I made my first cross-country trip. I think it was about 33 days, a little over 8,000 miles. When I got to the Badlands in South Dakota, the first real sign of the western terrain, the red rock, the dryness, the sagebrush and all that, I was transfixed. Drove across Wyoming and was blown away. Then started going to the parks. Yellowstone, the Grand Tetons, unbelievable. Out to the West Coast, California, all that, Grand Canyon. And, it just blew me away. And to put it into one statistic, that trip resulted in me spending half my life in the Western states. When I graduated from college and was applying to grad schools, I applied only to schools in the West. The furthest east I applied was Wisconsin. And I got a fellowship offer from the University of Oregon, and I needed the financial help to go. And I went to Oregon, even though I had not been to Oregon on my trip. But good enough, right? So I spent 2 years in Eugene getting a master's degree in English. And late in the second year, in the lounge one day, I saw a notice about a job opening at the University of Montana. And I thought, well, believe it or not, I didn't go to Montana on that trip either. But I vividly remembered Steinbeck's chapter on Montana. It's only 3 or 4 pages. And he starts out by saying, when you're this much in love, you can't even put it into words. That's how he felt about Montana. Well, if it was good enough for Steinbeck, it was good enough for me.
Yeah, if
I applied for the.
Couldn't find the words for it. It had to be something else.
Absolutely, and applied for the job. I got the job. Spent 3 years in Montana.
Was that Missoula?
Yes.
Okay. I think we may have talked about this. Missoula is as majestic an area. Now, I've been back and forth across country over the years.
Yeah, me too.
There is no more beautiful setting. Maybe Virginia. You could make a case for the Virginia. But just if you want the forest, if you want rustic and beautiful, Missoula is it. It's a small town community, but
yeah, it's a small city, maybe 50 or 60,000 people, built around the university, surrounded by ranches and farms, and spectacular scenery. It's a dozen miles west of the Continental Divide, so the climate is not as harsh in the winter as it is east of the Divide. Yeah, it was a heck of a place. I was very happy there for 3 years. It was there that I discovered legal poker, which led directly to my long life as a poker dealer in Las Vegas, a subject for another discussion. But
okay.
you see the chain of events. First to Oregon, then to Montana because of Steinbeck. In Montana, I got steered into poker, but I also, when I was there, a friend and I taught a community course on baseball literature. There weren't a whole lot of great baseball novels to choose from then, but we covered, I think, 5. And in preparing for that, I reread Lawrence Ritter's The Glory of Their Times, widely regarded as the best baseball book ever, and I would say it is. And it's the second book that had a huge effect on my life because I reread Fred Snodgrass's account of Victory Faust. This was in 1977, and I spent 20 years chasing the Faust story and eventually wrote a book about him. So those 2 threads came out of Montana, which came out of everything else.
May I ask what the fictional novels, I guess, baseball novels you covered? If I name a few of my favorite, favorites. I wonder if they'll coincide.
Okay, go ahead.
The Natural, or anything by Mark Harris. Let's see. There was, when I was a kid, there was the Keystone Kids or something.
That I don't know, unless it's Bert Standish.
I'll come up with that. It was a series of books. Maybe one of them was the Keystone Kids. And about brothers coming up in the minor leagues, one a second baseman, one a shortstop, and that sort of thing. But I could stick with The Natural and Mark Harris, and
I'm with you. I'm with you halfway on that, Ralph.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Mark Harris and the Southpaw in particular. I'm also a fan of the book that inspired Harris, which is Ring Lardner's "You Know Me, Al."
Oh, that is.
And Henry Wiggin is descended from.
Henry Wiggins would say, "They're throwing curves, Mom. I'm coming home."
Yep. So I'm with you on that. I'll just name 3 or 4 of my other favorite baseball novels. One is The Celebrant by Eric Rolf Greenberg, about a jeweler who becomes the personal jeweler of Christy Mathewson and John McGraw and befriends them during their years in New York. That's wonderful. Darrell Brock wrote 2 terrific baseball novels, If I Never Get Back and Havana Heat. Do you know those?
I don't.
Oh, get a hold of If I Never Get Back, in particular Havana Heat. If I Never Get Back is a time travel novel. A man goes back and joins the 1869 Red Sox on their tour. Wonderful. And the other one, as I'm sure you simply omitted this from your list, is the Universal Baseball Association.
Yeah,
Robert Cooper.
As we speak, I'm looking for that in my library of baseball.
Well, it's about a man obsessed with dice baseball, so it's near and dear to our hearts.
What an effect! It was the first book that ever gave me some sort of justification for my imagination. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
In other words, there were other people that were engrossed in the fantasy of reproduction and what have you. And the one thing I didn't mention this to you, when you play a game on the computer simulating the way they were, you could see that in all crudeness sometimes, you can see where the ball is hit, and you can see the fielder respond and what have you.
I always do.
But
in dice ball, I do.
It's in your mind, and it's always better in your mind than it is anywhere else. And that's what I admired about Les Kiter's reproduction of Giant games.
Oh, wow, Les Kiter, wow. That brings back a memory.
Right, we got the Giants long distance, a recreated game, but Les Kiter made it exciting, and he nothing in front of him but the wire. In other words, ball 2, ball 3, foul.
Yeah. Did I tell you about the dice ball broadcasts that I did?
No.
In 1991, I spent a year in Cooperstown doing research at the Hall of Fame Library, and I did a broadcast of one of my Dice League games with these all-time All-Stars, the original cards, and I did an hour-and-a-half broadcast of the game as if it was being played at Doubleday Field.
Oh, wow.
So I described the field, the crowd, where each ball was hit. Oh, yeah. I still have the cassette.
And this came right off the top, I'll bet. It wasn't
Oh, sure.
Yeah. You didn't plan any of it, in other words. You just waited for the result of the game to determine what you were going to say. Nothing.
No, I broadcast as I went along, one at bat at a time.
Okay. That would be
So it was all spontaneous. We've heard, I've heard about some of the old-time broadcasters, and I think Marv Albert might have been one of them, who talked about taking tape recorders to ballparks, to major league games, and sitting off in the top deck by themselves so they wouldn't bother anybody, and practice broadcasting when they were kids.
Well, I'll tell you one person who does that, and that could be the greatest broadcaster of our time. And that's saying a lot.
Vin Scully? Oh, John Miller, yeah. Yeah, that's who I've heard talk about that, exactly.
Yeah, he would go up in the Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah.
It was from Hayward, which were really close to Oakland, and he'd go up with a tape recorder and just practice.
Yeah.
Don't think he was the first one to have done it. I read about someone else doing that too.
Yeah, I've seen it more than one place.
Right, but specifically he did it, and he credits getting better. And he was lucky.
Well, sure.
Charlie.
Hey, Ralph, listen, from the age of about 10 years old, I've spent a lifetime being interviewed in my head. It's just a variation of that.
That is,
I would play a game of wiffle ball and he beat the guy 13-5, and I'd interview myself after the game in my head. Wow. Yeah, that bases loaded double. Were you looking for that pitch? Oh, yeah.
And you'd have to come back with the response. You weren't just the interviewer, you were the interviewee. And they say, you're not crazy if you talk to yourself. You're crazy if you
only if you listen.
Well, it's nice that you can admit it. All right, I'm going to tell you a book that influenced my life right off the bat, and that was John's. Oh my God, I'm blanking. Am I? Is this early on onset? But John Updike was his reading, typically the book that really hit me. I think it was Rabbit Run. And
I had a feeling you were going for that one.
It just told me what life as an adult would be like. That's the only.
And you went ahead anyway.
I had no choice. I knew Kevorkian wasn't good. That I couldn't take that option. Although I've thought about it over the years, but I did decided to pursue the growing up part, or at least growing older, and it just gave, when I had the emotions of crossing over from childhood to adulthood, or from getting responsibility and all that thing, at least I wasn't surprised by the results over the years. He prepared me quite well, let me say, and I'm grateful for him. He was a terrific writer. And he kept my interest. That's the best way I can describe a writer. My highest compliment: can you just keep me turning the pages? And,
yeah.
And being sorry when you finish a book. I don't know if you get that. There's a grieving process in the last chapter, the last few pages, the last. know it's over, and you'll probably never get in your head. You'll probably never find a book this interesting or this engrossing or whatever, and you mourn that until you find something else. And
exactly, yeah. Ralph, are there a lot of books that you reread, or are you one and done?
You mentioned trilogy by Mark Harris. I even have it in a paperback edition.
Yeah, I do.
Southpaw, and Steam Stitch, or
ticket for a Steam Stitch.
Right. Okay.
And Bang the Drum Slowly.
And there was another one that he wrote after that.
Bang the Drum Slowly. Yeah.
No, but even after.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's
yeah.
Or it was, the title was written in Henry Wiggins' dialogue, which is not easy to read. I think we talked about this once before, like reading Mandingo. It just takes a little more concentration. But I think.
Hey, I once tried. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I once wrote a whole novel in Damon Runyon style. That didn't get published either, but it was fun to write.
I can imagine. Yes.
Let me tell you about the book that I've read 24 times. And I read it for the first time just a few months before I read Travels with Charlie. My first day of college, my first class and assignment was the first 13 pages of War and Peace. And I read them twice just to be sure I had them. Went to class, and it was an old classroom building and a good-sized class that seated about 60. There were 90 kids taking the course, sitting on the floor, the sills, wherever they could. The professor, a guy named Jonathan Kistler, was the Pied Piper of the English department. My freshman class at Colgate was 1/3 pre-med. We graduated 1/3 English majors. And a lot of it was because of this course. So I went in there, and now there's 90 of us. We only had to read 13 pages. And Professor Kistler just started asking us, not interpretive questions, just who said this or, who had this expression or whatever. It wasn't until the 9th question that somebody got an answer right. That guy went on to be our valedictorian.
Wow.
And it was a very humbling experience for me. I had been one of these, I had never had to study in high school, and I realized not only did I have to figure out a way to learn this stuff, but I was in the same boat as everybody else. We were all starting out to learn how to read and how to think. And that's what college is about.
But you were talking about being disappointed. You were in an Ivy League school, am I correct? I think Colgate is.
No, the legend is that Colgate turned them down as an athletic conference. So no, Colgate's in the same athletic conference as Lafayette, Lehigh, Bucknell, Holy Cross, schools like that, Fordham.
I'm talking about the Ivy League, not.
Yeah, Colgate is not in the Ivy League.
Oh, okay. But highly reputable school.
Oh, it's academically on a par with them. Yeah. So I read War and Peace, and it blew me away. It's about people the age of college students going off to war and learning about life. And my sophomore year, I asked Kistler if I could audit the course. I said, I really only caught about 25% of what you were trying to teach us. I'd like to get the rest. And that got his attention. I ordered the course. He became my advisor and, steered me to grad school and all the rest of it. And for a long time, I read War and Peace every year. I would read it at the start of the year. For me, it represents a sense of renewal and encompassing everything that the world throws at you and getting through it and above it. And then for a long time I didn't read it, and then I read it once in a while, but it's over 20 times. I read over 100 books to my late wife, Ralph, and the first one I read to her was War and Peace. Really? She survived that. I knew she was a keeper, and I read it to her again 10 years later. And it was much better because she didn't have to wonder who these characters were. She knew where they were going. But everything in life is encompassed in that book. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Gabriel, we haven't talked about this. You lost your wife.
Yes.
Would you like to talk of her a little bit?
Oh, my goodness.
I'd be honored.
Thank you, Ralph. I met Linda in 2002, actually just a couple of months before I went to work at the Hall of Fame. And we got married in 2006. She had already started dialysis by that time, and that kind of overshadowed the 10 years that we had together. She was the most resilient, optimistic, thoughtful, giving person I've ever known. Earth Mother, Den Mother kind. She raised other people's kids who needed help. She was a social worker, big into volunteering. I like to tell the story. That she was driving over from Cooperstown one time and saw these two little girls by the side of the road with a lemonade stand out in the middle of nowhere, just by a farm road. So she stopped, gets some lemonade, and she was probably the first person there because when they said it was 50 cents and she didn't have 50 cents, and wanted change for $1, they didn't have 2 quarters to give her. So all she had with her was $2. So she gave the $2 to the girls, took her lemonade and went off. And as she walked away, she heard one of the girls say to the other, "That's the nicest lady ever." And I think she was. I am immeasurably better as a human being because of the time I spent with her. We had very happy years, days, hours, and minutes together, and we got the most out of every day that we could.
Boy, what couldn't say nicer words about a relationship and about a person.
I've done a lot of things in my life, but I believe that the happiness that Linda and I had together is the greatest thing I've done. My parents were together for 45 years, and so I had a great example to draw from. I always have believed, and I said this at my father's funeral, that in a world that throws a lot at us and takes a lot out of us, to be the person who makes all the difference in just one other person's getting through this world is an ennobling thing to do. And that's what my parents did with each other, and that's what Linda and I did. So it's a beautiful thing to have in my life.
We are going to end on that because there's no way to say anything more.
Thank you, Ralph.
Let's just end. Gabriel, I love having you as a friend.
Same to you, Ralph. Let's do this again sometime.
And we will real soon. If
All right.
no sooner, we are going to meet Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, on our plans with George Case and some of the other usual subjects, and just have a great show of it. And for now, you really made my day special. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
All right, Gabriel. We'll talk soon. I will be back when I'm back. So thank you for listening, everybody. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, the Gall of the Man. I'm Ralph Tycho. Hey, I got the gall to ask you for a favor out there. If you enjoy us, if you don't enjoy us, box up some new or lightly used children's books and take them down to the Head Start program in whatever community you live. I don't have to tell you why. They're needed very much. As books have been important to my guest tonight, Gabriel Schechter, obviously, and books are our passion, and they will teach these kids to get away from computers, to become school ready, to get their nose out of devices, to let their imagination take over, and really, do me a favor. Get as many books to these kids as you possibly can, and that'll make the day go great for all of us. Thank you again, Gabriel. Thanks again, too, to David Nemec and Alan Blumpkin. We celebrated the life of Frank Robinson today. May he rest in peace. And Linda Schechter as well. Thank you, everybody. Be well. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.